Hello and welcome to episode 131 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. Bob Barker said the price is right, but we are asking, when is the price right? That's right. Today's episode is all about price. What do we expect at certain price ranges? Where do we sort of get queasy when it comes to pricing of games? Talking about all that stuff, all stuff. Cashola. What's the other words for cash?
It's too bad we don't have our Vanna White here with us. Speaking of the Price is Right.
Yep.
I just wanted to update you guys that whirring noise that Kellen was complaining about that he was blaming Mark for. He left the freezer door open.
Oh
that was
God.
the noise. I just solved the mystery.
Jeez.
I can't hear you, but goodbye. That's all.
In this day and age, Kellen, to waste energy like that.
Well, thank you, Vanna, for solving that.
With me, as always, are my two co-hosts, the fabulous Kellen, the red tank,
Fabulous.
and the magnificent Neelan, the orange tank.
Hello.
What's alliteration for orange?
I can't think of a good one.
Ornamental.
The original.
The original. Well,
Yeah.
no, Kellen would take umbrage with the original.
The outstanding. Nothing really goes like orange or...
Or isn't there, what's the word like for someone who speaks? Oration?
Oh, yeah, the oratory. Audacious, vaguely.
Yeah.
Rhyme is an art.
I think the safe answer is outstanding. And then for red,
Red.
radical.
Rambunctious.
Rambunctious is good.
Rambunctious. And I am, as always, the green tank, the greatest green tank.
That was a slam dunk. Gregarious.
Before we get into cashola, money, moolah, dinero, greenbacks, dead presidents,
Ching.
ka-ching. Before we get into all that, let's talk about the games that we've already purchased, maybe, and played. That is the games that we've played. Neelan, what have you been playing?
I did not purchase or play this game. Well, I did play it, but this I played...
Till you stole and played.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just be talking about a game just based on feeling alone. I've played a few games of Twin Tin Bots on Jeu, I think that's how you pronounce that, the French or German, I forget, online gaming website. And what Twin Tin Bots is effectively sort of like a Robo Rally variant. In Twin Tin Bots, you have, as the name would suggest, two robots to control, each with their own separate command line. And as in something like Robo Rally, you have a handful of cards that correspond to little orders that you can give them. And these are just very simple commands like move forward, turn left, turn right. You have two commands that are pick up crystal and unload crystal, because what you're trying to do in this game is move around the map, pick up the crystals, take them back to your base, and unload them. The neat little twist that makes this quite different from Robo Rally is that you're quite limited in how you can change the programming of your cards. You can only play one card per turn to either of your robots. As in, you don't get to play one card each. You pick one of your robots and you adjust its command line by one card, either by adding a card, taking a card away, substituting a card, and so on. So you sort of have to set up your programming kind of long term because the cards persist at the end of every round. So you sort of have to like add to your command line in a way that's going to work for your few turns because you might not be able to change it as often as you like. So suddenly you've set your robot off like careening to the other side of the board, and unless you're constantly updating its programming, it's just going to keep going. There's a lot of like fun stuff that you can do, which is like stealing crystals directly from other robots, which is fun. And then everyone has a command that lets them zap another robot.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Oh, yeah.
What the hell is a command?
A command? A command card.
He's talking about Simon.
I thought he was saying Simon for the first 5 minutes of this
my
oration.
God. You guys just been hung up on the word command for this entire thing? Command.
Command.
Is the correct pronunciation.
Yeah, in California it's command.
Command.
Like menagerie.
Yeah. So these, oh God, I'm going to try to do this in the worst American accent. So these command cards.
Whoa, too far. You went too far.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It's not the 4th of July, Neelan.
Yeah.
That was last week.
It's just rubbed off on me. I've just been like American ever since. Ever since I sung the national anthem, I've just felt it like well up inside me. Like it.
Yeah, we had a lot of listeners comment about how that really like hit them in a deep inside.
Yeah, they really moved them. But in summary, like the little things you're able to do in this game is stealing crystals from other people, like zapping them to like mess up their turns. It makes it really fun because you're all on this very small map. Unlike Robo Rally, it's not like this long path from start to end. It's a very close arena type map. So you're constantly bumping into each other, pushing each other, scrabbling with each other. It just feels very more close quarters, but with the same idea that you're going to mess up someone else's plans because that's what the game is. Feels more deliberative than Robo Rally, which ends up being a lot more chaotic. I've really enjoyed this. We've just done back-to-back games of it because it's been really neat.
I've heard of this game, and there was a time where I was trying to track it down, and I'm looking at the map now, and you're right. It has this very small, like you said, arena map, and I think
Totally.
it feels like, when you're comparing it to Robo Rally before I sort of had remembered it, one of the big issues with Robo Rally is, the size of the map. That's always like the first thing they tell you is like, no matter what the manual says, you only want to do like 2 flags, or it's all about constricting to sort of reduce the chaos. But this seems like a circular arena, like pen thing. Seems like it would contain that potential craziness and make for a fun experience.
Yeah, and I think that's turned out to be pretty vital in the case of this, because for the exact reason that you said, like, this ends up feeling like it doesn't run ridiculously long. It's hard to gauge because we've been playing it asynchronously online, but this feels like it would be over in about an hour, I think,
right,
if you were to play it in real life, because there's a very strict timer in the game. Once enough crystals come out, there's just literally 3 more rounds left in the game, and whoever has the most points wins. So it feels like it's a more condensed, more contained version of something like Robo Rally. I want to say it still has some problems, which are the same problems that Robo Rally has, in that it sometimes feels a little bit chaotic. Like, your best laid plans just get messed up constantly, but that's the game you're signing up for. And with that in mind, I've been digging it. That's Twin Tin Bots.
And so that's hexagonal instead of the squares in Robo Rally, right?
Yes, good point, actually. Yes, it's on a hex grid, a small, like, hex grid arena.
I'm looking at it now. It's got a nice board. I'm wondering, Mark, could we import this into 18xx? I hear they're looking for a new board art.
It's not the most art-heavy game in the world, but Kwanchai Moria did the illustrations for it. It looks cute and cartoony and pretty.
I'd be happy to try one of these, async, if you wanted, Neil. I don't know who you're playing with now.
Yeah.
That sounds cool. I mean, Robo Rally has always struck me as like the staunch defenders of it. You say, well, I didn't like my play of Robo Rally. They're like, but did you play it with, only 3 flags in this variant? Like, oh, you must have played it with too many players on the wrong map. And it's like, there's so many versions of it that it can deflect any type of criticism.
Right.
Which I think is fantastic.
So that's Twin Tin Bots by Philippe Kayat.
I've been playing a new edition, so to speak, of a classic game. I've been playing the new Ticket to Ride New York, which made me think of Kellen.
New York.
Obviously.
Well, thank you for thinking of me.
I always think of you anyway, but this is especially evocative of you. I was thinking about you and pizza pies and the subway and the Mets.
Mark.
Yeah.
I spent the night on a subway in New York.
Did you really?
Homeless. Not a joke. I'm not lying to you. In between my internship and my first job, okay, I had gotten the job, but all the interns I knew went home, right? Okay. And I didn't want to tell my new company that I had nowhere to sleep. I'm not kidding you at all.
No, you're not kidding.
I literally moved all my stuff to storage, like taking subway trips, round trip, up and down the subway to get my stuff to storage because I was poor as hell.
Yeah.
And then I went to the movies until like 2 a.m. Right, because it was hot as hell outside in August.
Right.
And then I got on the subway and slept.
That's great.
Until my apartment was ready the next day at like 10 or 11 that morning. It's bad.
Were you like terrified? That sounds like I would be terrified. Just from like oh my God, am I going to survive the night type thing? Not like in a way that I felt like I would be in danger, but just kind of like so crazy.
Yeah, you get used to sleeping on the subway, even though it isn't. And I think, I'm also 6 feet tall and
sure.
strapping young man. So that goes into it. But yeah, that was one of the dumbest things. Like in hindsight, I'm just like, that was the stupidest, dumbest. I don't even fathom why I had a credit card. It's like I was starting a new job in like a week, but somehow I thought that was better than getting a hotel room.
Sure.
I could have even gotten on the subway and ridden it for an hour and a half out of the city and gotten a cheap room and then come back. You know what I mean? But somehow I was like, oh yeah, this is going to work out great. This is the perfect idea.
Wow.
So I think this may even be a Target exclusive. I'm not certain, but...
Hit that sponsor bell.
That's right. Boom.
Use our discount code at Target.com. If you use the code BGB Brothers.
You get 50% off everything.
50% off everything in the store. That includes board games, Pokemon cards, and video game consoles.
That code has long since been canceled.
That's our private code.
So Ticket to Ride New York is sort of a condensed version of the game, both in terms of playtime and in terms of table presence and size. The game itself is like a half the size of a regular Ticket to Ride size box. It's quite small. And the board itself is very, very restricted and condensed.
Does it have the A train?
I wouldn't know, but you would.
That was the one I slept on.
Okay, gotcha.
I think it does. Oh, this is really biased against Uptown. Uptown Gamers Unite. It doesn't even have Uptown on the map,
It just
Mark.
ends at Central Park.
I can't play this as a New Yorker.
There are locations like Brooklyn, like Wall Street, like Chinatown, all these places that Kellen has visited that are considered tourist attractions. And if you have taxis instead of trains that connect there, you get a bonus point at the end of the game. So where this sort of manifests is towards the end of the game, if you don't want to get another destination card and you're trying to figure out where to place the taxis you have, there's a consideration of, well, let me just fill a route that hits one of these tourist destinations for a extra point. So it's a little slight variation, another sort of consideration in terms of where to place your taxis. When it comes to teaching somebody who's played Ticket to Ride, this game is like a 5-minute explanation. It's really simple to teach. Even those who haven't played it, the game is like most Ticket to Ride games, or at least like the original Ticket to Ride games, is quite straightforward in terms of teaching. The game itself plays in about half an hour. Again, the board is very small, and that manifests itself in a lot of blocking. I enjoyed it. I sort of felt myself a little concerned as to the replayability of the game. The largest routes on the New York board there's a single 4-space route. So I feel like with Ticket to Ride, one of the things that is like fun about the game is like figuring out, like, am I gonna get a destination ticket late in the game? Am I holding off for one big route? Like, am I gonna go for a 7 train route? Those big swinging moves. Whereas with New York, the game ends pretty quick and the board is very, very tight. So there aren't very many chances for these big swings or these big strategic pivots. It's very tactical, but that is sort of made up for with the spaces are, at a premium. But I just don't know if with such a small board, what the legs are like. But it's inexpensive. It's easy to teach. It strikes me as a great family weight game. Components are nice. You could get a bunch of little multicolored taxis. So yeah, I would recommend it, especially if you're a fan of Ticket to Ride and you're looking for something, maybe take to the office or something. Mm-hmm. Once you go back to the office, if we ever get back to offices, the footprint is super small. It's like a great Ticket to Ride in a small package.
One of the questions I have is, I think one of the things that's sometimes interesting about these smaller condensed versions, which I was thinking of when I played the 2-player Agricola recently, does it feel like it changes some of the strategic considerations of the game? Does it just feel like a simplified version of the game?
It feels more like a simplified
just
version of the game.
Like purely just simplified. Yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah. I mean, the bonus points, it's not a huge thing. It's not like a massive thing where you want to make sure you hit all the tourist destinations. Just small tweaks, but mainly streamlined.
Okay.
And mainly, like more like pared down.
That's an odd one for a game like Ticket to Ride, which is what most people would say is a good game as it is to introduce people to.
It is much smaller. I mean, Ticket to Ride is not like a behemoth. It's not like a big table hog.
Sure.
But if you're looking for something, to play, again, on like a smaller table or to bring with you
physically, yeah, sure, okay,
yeah, it sort of scratches that itch without making it like, hey, we're all sitting down to play Ticket to Ride. It just makes it like a much quicker affair. Set up and tear down and play. The entire thing is 30 minutes probably.
Right. Okay.
So it's like just a condensed, but it's nice. It gives you sort of what you want from a Ticket to Ride game. So I'd say if you're a Ticket to Ride fan or you want a family game for the go, you could do much, much worse than Ticket to Ride New York.
I'm mildly disappointed. I actually had this on the short list of things to pick up just because I like the general game flow of Ticket to Ride, but have been stuck in games where I'm like, this is too long. I've been doing this game flow for too long.
Right. Maybe I'll give it to you. I think it's a great 2-player game given the size of the board.
Yeah.
It works really well too. But yeah, I'll let you take a look at it and see what you think.
If that's not new enough, Ticket to Ride Amsterdam comes to us in 2020.
There you go. I was just thinking about it though. Maybe I don't know if I will give you Ticket to Ride New York because I feel like if you play it against Christina, you'll have an unfair advantage given your geographic knowledge of the area.
Well, I was counting on that. I don't know.
Right.
What do you mean?
Kellen, what have you been playing?
Yeah, so we actually have back-to-back Kickstarter doubleheaders, 2 games currently running on Kickstarter that we got sent preview copies of, and so we wanted to cover with you together. One that we have all played together in a park, socially distanced with masks. We made Mark wear kind of a full face covering.
Yep.
You want to tell him why, or should I?
Oh, well, I mean, the CDC has asked me not to speaking.
You specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
So.
Yeah, we'll cut that. So the first game that we're going to be talking about is called Whale Riders, and this is on Kickstarter. This is a family weight Reiner Knizia new game, a game of playing as people who ride whales. This has the coolest box art I have seen in years. Cool enough that I reached out and said, hey, we want to play that because I want to play as the cool whale rider on the cover. As it turns out, the cool whale rider on the cover is the orange player color, and the red player color does not have a cool whale to ride. I think it's a different sea creature.
Which is funny because it kind of makes the title more correctly Whale Rider. Is he the only one that's riding a whale?
I think there is one other whale, but there is an orange whale, and Neelan got to ride it when we played Whale Riders. This is a family weight game from the only true and living Dr. Reiner Knizia. So in this game, you're racing up and down the coast. And when I say you're racing up and down the coast, I mean that in a very literal sense. You go down the coast once, and then you go back, and the game is over. So you're not going up and down. So if you like going up and down, you won't like this game.
Well, you are going up and down once.
Once.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to be clear that it's not
It's
not
such a vital
free
component.
willy here.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going up and down and up.
Right.
It's one and there. Okay. So each space along the coast is a game of you can get the first resource for free. You can get the second resource for 1 coin, and then 2 coins, and then 3 coins. And you are constantly making the decision of whether to press forward or stay and interact with that market. So it's a series of markets that you go all the way down. And then when you come back, you are acquiring pearls for money, and the pearls are the victory points in the game. So you have a set of 3 hidden contracts that people don't know about. That's you need these 2 resources, these 2 resources, and these 2 resources, and that will get you a couple victory points and a couple coins. The limiting factor of the game, the thing that makes the game intriguing, is the 2 actions that you have available to you. You are just limited by those actions, which is move a space forward, buy 1 tile. If you want to buy 2 tiles, you can do that, but once again, that takes both of your actions. Or turn in contracts. And so what you can do on a turn is extremely limited. But what ends up happening is you're all playing nice at this little market, and then Mark takes both of his actions and goes down the coastline, and you're like, oh, damn, like Mark is way ahead of us. He's going to make it back to shore first and start getting all of the victory points. And so that really is the main tension of the game. It reminds me in that way of like Deep Sea Adventure.
Yeah.
But it's just one time. And so people will start making a break for it way before you think they're going to. And these places are filling up with more and more resources. It's a contract fulfillment game where you're just extremely limited by those 2 actions. What did you guys think of Whale Riders by the Dr. Reiner Knizia?
Well, first thing, just to clarify, as with all Knizia games, if you look this up, make sure that you remember that the last letter is a Z, so it's Whale Riders. Just as a public service announcement, I'd like to just clarify. I think everybody already knows this,
So
but
that's
just...
all these games, Kellen.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, that aside,
Raz being my favorite.
yeah. As with other Knizia games, it feels very solidly built. Mechanisms, everything feels like it makes sense. It doesn't feel like there's any like broken strategy, or it feels like it's been play tested. Everything feels tightly constructed, tightly organized. And I do like the tempo aspect. I always like games where tempo is a consideration, and this one is certainly has that. It may be too much of a consideration, as Kellen was saying, sort of like when a player shoots out ahead, a lot of times the alternative strategy is to sit back and just collect. And you can do a little bit of that, but because that first player getting back to shore or back to the original spot can also trigger the end of the game, and in triggering the end of the game, pick up a lot of points as well, you sort of can't stay behind too much. So, once that break is made, you sort of have to follow along. But in general, I enjoyed it. Didn't blow my socks off, but it's solid. It's a game that I don't think I would ever turn down the chance to play. It's beautiful. The art is, as Colin said, beautiful. But I came away afterwards thinking that game sort of scratched a Knizia itch for me, but I found myself, after playing the game, wanting to play maybe other Knizias. It sort of like sparked a Knizia desire in me, which is always burning, but maybe for other Knizia games, which I think maybe are superior. But this one's fine.
He's just teasing you, right?
That's right.
I think solid is exactly the right word. That is, I think, a word I come back to a lot when it comes to Knizia, because it does just feel like This is something I say about his games a lot, is that it feels like he's worked it all out correctly. Like everything is just there in the right amounts such that it all sort of mathematically makes sense. It feels right. I don't know what I would change immediately to improve it. Like, it does feel like the most refined version of that game he's making. But like Mark said, it's not something that blew me away and would be something I would actively seek out. But I enjoyed it. And I was surprised by things even in it while we were playing it. Like, one of the tensions of the market is that as you're making the return trip back, the market is a lot worse than when you're going down it the first time. And if you're not thinking about that, you're probably setting yourself up for like a very disappointing round of purchases on the way back to the shore.
Which is another punishment for players who are trying to play that, like, I'm going to hang back and pick up
exactly.
things.
It smartly disincentivizes you to like just say, okay, well, if you're going to play the fast game, I'm going to play the slow game, because you can't do that. You have to play a little bit of both. It's certainly clever, and I enjoyed it.
I think I was surprised at how family weight it was. Like, if I'm playing a game with children, I'd much rather be playing this than any children's game that exists. But it's closer to that space in my mind than a game for adults at game night. I think there's a couple things that make it middling for me. One is that there's a ton of tiles. I think there's like 100 in this bag, and you're literally constantly moving down 10 different rows of tiles over and over and over again, and it's annoying. Like, it literally is physically annoying to do. Christina and I argue about that. It's like, it's not fiddly, it's just like there's process. Mm-hmm. And she kind of likes that, the ritual of it, like, okay, another tile, but I'm just like, my God, every single turn we're doing this over and over and over again. Contract fulfillment is also not really my favorite thing, especially in the context of hidden and some of those values being minned and maxed by other players and feeling like you don't have as much control. Interestingly enough, this game goes from 2 to 6 players. We have played it as a 4-player, and I have played, I think, 3 games as a 2-player. I think at 2-player, you definitely have more control than at 4-player, where the markets are changing more often. Okay. I have not played it at 6, so your mileage may vary, but it seems absurd to even attempt it. By the time it gets back to your turn, the market will be completely different. You have no future control. It's completely tactical at that point, would be my guess. What's also interesting is this price point is quite low for the beautiful artwork. The Kickstarter is not live yet, so I will not reveal the price point, but it is a well-priced game from what I understand of their marketing materials. There is also a card game version of this that is releasing at the same time. And at this point in time, I am tempted to back the card game Whale Riders game to see what that is all about when that fulfills. So that is Whale Riders by Grail Games. This is on Kickstarter if you're interested in taking a look at that. And I would. There's a beautiful orange whale, but only if you play orange. So think about that. All right. Dead Reckoning by AEG is on Kickstarter right now, and as the time of recording has raised $380,000. Just want to focus on the price point.
Yeah.
Dead Reckoning is a card crafting game. So if you're not familiar, those are the games that have acrylic cards and card sleeves, where you're actually, instead of acquiring new cards, you're actually upgrading cards. And so cards can get different pieces of other cards, and those layer with transparency, and you build your deck through what they call card crafting. So this was seen in a couple of games. I know we have played Custom Heroes. Mm-hmm. Trick-taking game that used this. I know there's Mystic Veil is probably the most popular, and then there was a big box game, I think it's called Edge of Darkness, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Mystic Veil and Edge of Darkness. I think Mystic Veil is the game that sort of brought this to the mainstream, but that, Edge of Darkness, and Dead Reckoning are all designed by John DeClaire.
Dead Reckoning takes that card crafting system and applies it to a 4X game on the high seas, where you portray Captain Jack Sparrow and his friends. No, you don't. Just generic pirates. But it is a 4X game where you have a deck of 12 cards, and those cards never change. But you are upgrading them each turn. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3. You're sailing out on the high seas, and the further away from the harbor you get, the better the cards are out there. You're doing area control on islands, trying to acquire islands. You are fighting both merchant ships and other players in PvP combat. You are encountering different things and making choices. There is a ton. You're building buildings and exploiting the islands. There is a ton going on in this game. It is a Euro game, very, very much so. And it also cribs sort of, well, I'm sure it's not original to Scythe, but uses sort of a 9 different victory conditions, achievements that you must do. And then you have to do 4 of them, and that triggers the end of the game. And so it's like have 30 coins, or sink a pirate ship, or win 4 battles, or place this many, control cubes onto the islands. This game is crazy. It's insane. There's a lot going on here, and it's getting a lot of hype, and rightfully so. The art is beautiful.
Ian O'Toole.
Ian O'Toole, thank you, up-and-comer. The game is expansive, and it's very, very interesting. There are a lot of systems. As soon as I got done with the rules, I said, I think this is a Nealon game. I need to get this to Nealon's house, but I couldn't because of quarantine, and also I wanted to play it, so why would I do that? There's a lot going on. There's a lot of choices that you're making. And it does interesting things even with a deck building framework, which is that you can play as many cards as you want from your hand, and then you draw 4 every turn, but your hand limit is 6. So if you keep 3 cards, then you can only draw 3 cards at the end of your turn. So you can never draw above your hand limit. So it allows you a little bit of options, right? Each card has a level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 in the card. So you physically are rotating the card around. So before you take each turn, you upgrade your first mate, you upgrade your captain to unlock new abilities and actions that you can take on the board. It has a framework of you can do as many actions as you want on the board, and it limits you in very, very specific Euro ways that remind me in some ways of like Lords of Hellas, where you set sail and you can then move 3, but it's all tightly controlled, and the beginning of the game feels like a Euro game that is expanding outward into something that's much more open-ended. But it's not open-ended, right? At the other end. Like, it's still a Euro game, and what you're doing is very tightly controlled. And then you've got this battle system that is absurd, right? The battle system is straight up, I have 3 cannons on my stuff, you have 2 cannons, great, pick up 5 3D squares, or cubes as we call them on this podcast, and then you throw them in this battle tower that pulls them out onto like a little board, and depending on where those cubes land, it does hits or it does different things to people back and forth. But then each player can choose to pass or not pass or use battle abilities. So it's like, oh, I'm winning right now, I'm going to pass, because if I use my battle ability that puts another cube in the tower, I could hit my own thing and then lose. So I pass, but then Nealon uses a battle ability. I'm like, okay, fine, Nealon. I'm using my battle ability, and then I throw 3 more in there. It's fun. It's very interesting. It's also long, and it's fiddly. So what I can say for me, and I think, and I'm stealing it from Christina, and I wasn't going to say that I'm stealing it from Christina, but one of the things that happens with a Kickstarter is you play it for the first time. You're so excited, you back it, you hit back, it shows up at your door, you're like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. You play it once, and then you're like, oh, it's almost deflationary no matter what, because you spent all this money, you spent all this time hyping it up. The curiosity for Dead Reckoning, for me, has not gone away after playing it. I've only played it once, and that may sound like faint praise, but it's actually not. It's big praise for me.
For sure.
Because it's long. They say you can play a 4-player game in 2 hours once everyone knows it. Okay, maybe. There's a lot of physicality to, putting acrylic things in sleeves, and then you got to take it down. You're like, oh my God, you get so much in this box, right? Price is another thing that people talk about with Dead Reckoning, is maybe it's too expensive. There's a lot of components going on. There's a lot of beautiful artwork, a lot of things happening. It's very, very interesting. What questions do you have for me about Dead Reckoning?
First of all, I want to know this battle system. I'm looking at pictures on BGG, and I see the battle system, but it has this like boat that's connected to it. So like there's like a 3D boat, and you throw the cubes in the boat. Yep. You had this in the prototype you played?
I have this. Yeah, I've got the boat.
That's crazy. It looks great. I mean, it looks really fun.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting you to like this, and I don't know if I'm more annoyed that it's actually good and sounds like something I have to back versus something I could have written off, because I also took a look at that battle system. I was like, this just seems too much, but it sounds like it's fun, at least.
It is fun, and there's one of the places is exploding, so if you land a 3D square there, you get to put 2 back in, and keep going, so you always have a chance. Okay. But the battle abilities is just enough. It's just enough control where it's like, it's literally battle ability is move one cube into an adjacent area. So it's like perfect, you know, I'm going to do my move. And so I felt like I was in control of the battles that I was having. I think for my taste, for someone who says Kellen, you know, is the tank that I most align with, which I'm sure is all of you listening, there's a lot of systems. I think my preference would be for one or two of them to go away. There's buildings, and you can be in pirate mode or non-pirate mode for people who don't want to do like the PvP forward stuff. But as it stands, I wanted to go out to the deep sea because those abilities on the cards, I was like, oh, I'm slotting this one in here, you know, and there's one icon that's just the, what do you call the thing that steers a boat?
A rudder, the wheel?
It's just a wheel, I think.
A wheel.
The wheel icon, yes, as they say in nautical terms, the wheel.
The 3D circle.
The 3D circle icon is just a modifier. And so you get one on your top row in the acrylic, and you've got 3 of those icons. Then the next one you get says for every of that symbol, for every 3D circle that you have, now you get to place 3 cubes when you do that. And you're like, so you're combining things and you're upgrading things. And there's just this little extra elements of control. And it may not make sense to you, but before your turn begins, you get to upgrade one of the cards in your hand. So it's like, what am I going to do on this turn? It was tough to learn the rules. There's a lot going on. It's very, very solid. I'm curious. I think it'll be much better at higher player counts. I think it's very much in the like, let's all fight each other wheelhouse, which is a weird hybrid because it is Euro. Yeah. It is a Euro. It's a Euro, and then surprise, you're fighting each other over and over again and blowing each other's ships up. And then surprise, the battle system is throw cubes.
Yeah. 2 things. This makes me more intrigued to how you'd feel about Eclipse. But coming back to that, one of the problems I feel like these types of games have in multiplayer is that when 2 people are fighting, it's this prolonged thing between 2 people that no one else is participating in. Do you think that would be a problem in multiplayer? Like, are the battles that prolonged?
No, I don't think so. Definitely not. Okay. I mean, definitely compared to, like, I know in Forbidden Stars.
That's a good example, yeah.
That's a huge example of, oh my God, it's going to be 20 minutes. It's time for a bathroom break, you know, and a hot dog both together, right? Not at the same time. Not at the same time. No, I don't think so. I mean, you have a maximum of 6 cards or maybe more if you're increasing your hand draw. So I don't think it would take that long. And the results for losing a battle are not you don't immediately die, right? This is a Euro. This is Care Bear land. You have to get hit 5 times. So there's a lot to like here, but there's a lot. Even in a tweet I made about it, I was like, there's many great unique systems, but like, a lot. Like, it's a lot of systems. And it's like, is that too much? I think this is going to be perfect for people. I looked on the Kickstarter and saw that they have like a campaign style thing. And I'm like, no. Like, I'm not going anywhere near, like, I have less than 0 interest in that. But I could see people really enjoying that. I'm tempted to back it right now. And I don't know that it's exactly at my taste. I want to play it at 4 players. I worry that our 4-player game is going to be 6 hours long.
Right.
But there is some fun, and, you know, it's like there's a little bit of even the lightest of role-playing. It's like Christina's like, oh my God, no, you're level 4 Buccaneer. You know, it's like, because I upgraded him all the way. That was my homeboy.
You and your Buccaneers.
Exactly. No, the Broncos. What are you talking about? I, too, follow sports ball.
I know you said there's a lot of systems going on. I'm looking at the listing on BGG, and it's got the weight rating at 3.5, which is quite heavy. Would you say that it's also heavy, or is it?
I don't think it's that. It's like, there's a lot, but they do get out of the way. It has a lot of a normal framework of like, I'm putting out my 4 cards, and there are 3 of that symbol, 2 of that symbol, 1 of that symbol. And then the game is like, do as much as you want, right?
Right.
There's a little bit of fiddliness in you can only pick up 2 cards per turn, even though you can do as many things as you want. You can only explore 1 island.
Right.
You know, you must set sail before you move, and you can do unlimited loading and unloading, but when you set sail, you can't have stuff in your brig. But what you can do is unload all the stuff into the harbor, then set sail, then load the stuff back into the harbor. Sure. So you don't need to do that when you set sail from home. So there's some...
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I didn't like saying that. I'm sure you didn't like listening to it. But I'm still curious.
Yeah.
And that is the mark of something interesting.
Sure. Yeah.
And I hope it bears out, because it's very unique. Very, very cool.
That's very cool. I'm excited to try it.
That is Dead Reckoning.
Before we get into our feature topic, just another shout out to join our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. There is a ton of really interesting conversation going on. We just started a new channel called BG Beer or maybe Bugbear. I'm not sure how people are pronouncing it, but it's spelled BG Beer.
Pretty sure it's pronounced Bugbear.
It could be. It could be.
He's commanding you to say it the right way, Mark.
Yeah, so we have a new BG Beer, a Bugbear of the Week, where somebody's nominated as our listener of the week, and that's been a really fun new thing. Big shout out to moderators Marnie Lee and Woggers, who sort of spearheaded that channel, and it's been really fun to check out. We also are, by popular demand, doing yet another math trade. So, as I've always wanted, the desire to do more and more math trades has spread throughout the BGB community. So, by popular demand, we're doing our third math trade. By the time you hear this episode, if you hear it within 3 weeks of the date of download, it'll be active. We're going to be running it for about 3 weeks. So, join up. It's a, again, very beginner-friendly trade. It's been a lot of fun, and we're doing it again. So, go to boardgamebarrage.com/Discord to join in the fun. We've got tons of people there, and it's been a blast. But let's put that aside and get down to brass tacks, get down to cashola. We're talking about price. So Kellen had a list of questions that I thought were going to be good in spurring the conversation. So let's start with question number 1 and see if we can get the ball rolling that way. So question 1 is, what in your mind is the most common price for a board game? Obviously, they vary a great deal, but when you think of board game prices, and I guess this sort of goes with question number 2. We might as well throw that in now. When does the price give you pause? At what point do you start reconsidering, or maybe start getting more careful about your purchases? What do you guys think?
In my head, I feel like, excluding the stuff like the Super Deluxe stuff, like Kickstarter, that sort of thing, which is a separate conversation we'll probably get back to. But in my head, it's kind of like the $20 price point for like small box card games like The Resistance, small party games, that sort of thing, and like $50. Those seem to be like the 2 main price points in my head. I don't know if that tracks for the rest of you. For whatever reason, I feel like if I see a game that's like a $40 or a $35, I'm like, oh, that's cheaper than usual. Or something that goes like down to $10, I'm like, oh my God, if this is good, everyone should have it.
For posterity's sake, at the time of this recording, a banana costs $10 US. 2 bananas for a small card game, and 5 bananas for a normal big bucks Dominion game.
Exactly. Please express all future prices in bananas.
Thank you.
For me, I have a very clear number, which is, I guess, in the parlance that we're using here, would be 3 bananas. $30 for me is the number. It's actually a very clear number in my head. And this is almost exclusively because I'm dealing almost exclusively in the secondary market. So for me, if a game is over $30, it's a game probably that I'm only interested in trading for. And I don't know why that number, I guess I just feel like if a game is more than $30, I'll just work my way up there in a trade, and I'm not really interested in paying for it. It's a very, very clear number I have in my head. So if it's $30 or less, I'll buy it. If it's not, I'll trade for it. And honestly, I'll trade for anything, but I don't think I'd ever want to spend more than $30 cash on something. And I don't know why I arrived at it, but it's very firm in my mind.
Is it $29.99? What about $31.03?
I actually will go up to 31 because in trades,
Not very firm.
well, right, that's
like you
true.
just said.
I'm standing on a foundation of sand. But the reason I do 31 is because in a trade, I want to be the guy who sticks out just a little bit. So if everybody's offering $30, I'll offer 31. But that's the line.
And that's a firm line.
That's a firm line.
31.
That's right. Kellen.
So this is interesting to me, I think, because everyone talks about the general price of board games increasing perhaps over the last 5 years. And there's been a lot of consolidation in the board game market with Asmodee sort of buying a lot of companies, minimum advertised pricing being part of the discussion, which is where a game can only be sold at a certain price point or higher. I always kind of anchor around $40, so it's somewhere between the two of you, where once it's above 40, I'm like, this has to justify above 40 to me. Are there minis in this? And not that that's a value for me, but are there minis in this game? Wait a minute, is this some big box Kickstarter thing? If it's $50, I have to really want it or have some pre-knowledge of it. And I think all of the blind impulse buys for me are in the and this will vary depending on your financial situation. This will vary depending on what country you're in and what access you have to like Amazon Prime. But for me, the $20 to $30 range is a sweet spot for like flyers. And once I get to 40, I'm kind of wanting to know what's inside the box.
Yeah, I think that the reason I feel like there are a couple of sort of, big bucks Euro games recently that have sort of hit that $40 price point, and it struck me as cheaper than most. Teotihuacan, I believe, came in at around that time, and I was like, oh, that's a lot in that box for $40. Same thing for Gugong, I think, is kind of around the same price. And the reason that 50 borderline stuck with me is because just recently I saw Marco Polo 2, I think, is going for $60 as its MSRP, and I was like, oh, that feels like more expensive than your average medium weight Euro game.
And just to your Marco Polo 2, I think, Glenmore 2 is a game I had my eye on, but also it seems like the MSRP is around that $60 range. Right. So yeah, it seems like prices, as Colin mentioned, have been creeping up in terms of baseline. But when it comes to taking a flyer on games, for me, the way I do this, and again, this is like an edge thing, but join the math trade and maybe try it out. But taking a flyer using games that you have that you don't want to play anymore and trading them for games that, maybe losing a little bit on the value, but if you want to take a flyer on a game, trade a game that you already have that you're done with, and be a little bit more open in a math trade, which is what I would do. If there's a game that I have that sort of run its course for me and I really want to try something, I might be a little looser with that game in terms of what I want in a math trade. And that's where I get my, I want to take a swing at this without doing too much research. Because I tend to be pretty research heavy when it comes to targeting games.
And I think, the straight blind buy, I don't think I do at all.
Yeah.
I think that the minimum version for me is to go on BGG, Board Game Geek, and look at the 9s and 10s and look for written descriptions from evangelists. A lot of these games just come out and they're 6, 7, 8 average. And there's no one in the 9s or 10s. There's like 2 people, and it's probably the designer and the designer's mother. And I love seeing those evangelists for a game and say, no, a lot of people don't get this one. It's actually a 10 out of 10. And then I'm like, okay, someone likes it that much. And so that passion for it will get me to take a flyer even when the reviews are down lower.
Yeah.
Mark, do you know anything about Marco Polo 2 that would suggest it's needing a higher price point from like a components perspective? Like what's in the box that's different from the original game?
As far as I know, in terms of like the number of components, like the sheer number of components and just the game in general, there's nothing that I've seen. I haven't played this or Glenmore 2, which actually I think falls under the same category of games that in terms of what's in the box doesn't really exceed the first version of the game that much. So, yeah,
and mind you, I guess that that doesn't always have to be the be all end all, right? Because I think Marco Polo 1, I think, is typically a $50-ish game, so it would make sense that they would want to maybe make the new one seem like, okay, this is the newer one, so it's slightly more expensive, and then maybe that's not an uncommon thing.
And I think it's important, and we're very focused on price today, and we could spend hours talking about value, price and value, and I think we're all on the same page, but maybe it's worth having this discussion here. If Marco Polo 2, if we could know that it had been play tested and balanced and was a superior game to Marco Polo 1, but was $80, even though it had no component differences, I would be willing to pay that price.
Sure.
So playtesting, for example, is an unsung hero of cost.
Totally.
It costs money for people to play it. And so I think people get so caught up in this value of like, there's not 77 minis, and the cost per mini on a Kickstarter makes mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that that's discussed.
Totally.
Here.
And I think that's vital because it's something that comes up all the time, which is like the cost of employment just to make one of these games is the real actual cost. Like it's not costing them anywhere near $60 to put those components into the box.
Or my mindset is like, I will pay for the game whatever it sort of settles on in the market after it's sort of like gone through its paces there. So like, if after people have played a game for a while, because I'm not interested in getting a game immediately, but say Marco Polo 2, has been on the market for a year and it settles on $70 and it turns out to be a great game and people are, buying and selling it for about $70, I'm happy to pay that for it. I'll pay what
is that ethical?
How do you mean?
Well, like if this is like a car, right? New car model comes out and you want to wait for other people to like find out that the brakes don't work and they die.
You want me to die?
Well, no, I'm saying you want other people to die, probably.
Well, I don't want me to die.
Yeah, so ethical, probably not.
Or just make the brakes better. No, I don't know if that if that analogy stands up so much.
With a strict scrutiny? What are you talking about? Of course it does.
Mark, people die of board games every week. How dare you?
That's true. I should not be so flippant about it. No, I don't. I wonder if that feels unethical. I'm curious if it does.
No, I like that mentality, and so I take it all back, whether by edit or by not by edit. Which is to say that there are people who will say, "Oh, I have to get it now because it's going to be sold out." And you're saying like, well, if the game's $50 and it becomes time tested, I'll buy it for $80 next year.
That's true.
And I'll be happy about it.
Right. Absolutely. There have definitely been games where, like, small print run games or games from small companies where the price has gone up from the initial, sales of it and been tested. People love it. And I will pay more than the MSRP. It's not for me about the MSRP as much as it is like where the market has shown it belongs. So we've sort of established the general guidelines when it comes to what we're looking for, when it comes to pricing and what we expect. But are there other exceptions? Are there things that sort of stand out in the board game world where you sort of step outside those boundaries?
I think the one that is probably on everyone's mind when this discussion comes up is splatter games, right? Like Food Chain Magnate, The Great Zimbabwe, Antiquity, like these games always have prices that seem so far beyond the mean for games of their size, weight, what have you. And that's like the specific niche that studio has carved out for themselves, quite frankly. Because if you would look at something like Food Chain Magnate, where it's a game that's just full of like cardboard chits and nothing else, and I hate to say it, not particularly good looking cardboard chits. Like, as much as I like the aesthetic they're leaning into for FCM, I don't think it actually graphically holds together, especially when you look at the map. So it kind of becomes this question of like, not what are you paying for? Because like we said, components isn't the be all end all, because I think, as Mark has said, Splatter have proven themselves. These games have proven themselves. People will still happily pay those prices for those games because they're fantastic games that you can't see the likes of anywhere else in the industry. So it's kind of this strange anomaly, what feels like in the board game space, where they've carved out this very specific price point for their stuff and they have the audience to support it.
Is that quality only, though? Or if Asmodee was releasing Splatter games at $100, would you put up with that price point? Is there more to it than just the games are good?
I think them being independent is a large part of it, right? Because they are, I believe, independently manufacturing, producing, distributing the game. So I think the markup in price, is going towards a lot of the cost of production, which is where I'm willing to forgive it a little bit more. Whereas in the case of Asmodee or a massive company on that sort of order, like it costs them next to nothing to distribute, manufacture, make these games from a corporate level. So it does feel like a little bit like, okay, where is my money actually going relative to the cost of production? I feel like I'm much more willing to do that when I know my money is going to a studio that is doing a lot of the work on their own.
I feel like talking about Splatter, the company that feels to me like Splatter Jr. is Hollandspiel, which is by Tom and Mary Russell. And they're also like a mom and pop shop. They've released games like An Infamous Traffic and Meltwater and This Guilty Land, which I love looking out for new Hollandspiel games because that there is a in the garage ethos sort of like vibe whenever you get them. All their games come in these really thin boxes that you can imagine them being, folded up by hand. And
did Tom do the folding or did Mary?
One of them certainly did. I don't know if it's Tom or Mary, but one of them did. And the games they're always interesting. They're always feel like they're going to be outside the box or weird or something about them is going to be striking. So if that sounds interesting, well, first of all, I would say you should follow Tom Russell on Twitter because he talks a lot about game design. So if you like the idea of that small publisher sort of ethos, I'd recommend, Infamous Traffic. I think Tom has very kindly given up the rights of this game back to Cole Worley. So there probably is going to be reprint soon, but it's just a really, really weird economic game that has a lot of systems that are unlike anything else. It's not necessarily the most rules laden game, but everything fits together very oddly. It's very opaque in a very interesting way. It feels like you're eating an exotic meal. Whenever I've played Infamous Traffic, it's just felt unlike anything else. This Guilty Land is another great game dealing with Congress and slavery, and it's just a very interesting take on a topic in a unique way. I think Guilty Land is a little more straightforward, a little more analogous to games that you've played with a political bent, maybe like a Twilight Struggle sort of feeling. It has that card-driven aspect to it that is something you might have seen before, but just done in an interesting way and just striking. I recommend those two. I've heard very good things about Meltwater. I know Big Me's a big fan of that one. That's one of been interested in playing. I also have their game 4X and the Sioux line, which I'm interested in.
I want to play that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think my big blind spot is relatively well known, which is Japanese small box games. I think the biggest one here is Oink Games releases a game or two every year in a very small box, and they usually end up costing about $25 for the box size, sometimes up to $30 even at conventions. And if you look at the box, if you look at the components, you're paying a premium for what it is. I have so much love for Oink Games in this studio. I bought a retrospective product catalog of all the games they've released from 2010 to 2018. And Christina was like, oh, this is cool. It's like art and branding and the games. And then I told her that it was in Japanese and I can't even read it. And she got really mad at me. But they released this year a game called Durian that is just this lovely green color with a monkey on the front. I don't know anything about it. I imported it from Japan. It sat in COVID processing for 2.5 months. I had to use a forwarding service. I overpaid, right? Because I paid not only the $25 I paid to ship it, but it has this bell in it, guys. It has this little bell.
Oh, wow.
Can you hear that?
That sounds like $25 to me.
That's what I'm saying. And we don't know anything. This is 10 out of 10 Board Game Brush. But I collect the Oink games almost more like a collector, which is something that I've struggled with in the past on the podcast. But Oink games, for me, the price goes out the window when they're involved specifically. And I think, too, to a lesser extent, other indie publishers, I understand if it gets weirder, if it gets different, I want to pay for it because I want to encourage that weirdness, even if it doesn't translate, right? Like they're making less copies, right? They're making 400 copies of the game instead of 10,000. There's so much that goes into a smaller print run that, you may not get the value out of it beyond supporting this weirdness, which is, I think, where the fun is.
I will say that I haven't spent very much out-of-pocket money than most of my game acquisition via trade, but one of the places where I do buy games directly is from Hollandspiel. It's tough with Splotter, which would be another company I'm attracted to because of the cost of shipping and all that stuff. And because they're a little more available on the market than Hollandspiel. But when a new Hollandspiel game comes out, if I'm interested in it, I'm much more quick to pull the trigger and buy it. Any last thoughts, guys, before we wrap this up on the pricing and the prices of board games nowadays?
The only other thing that I had thought of was talking about the price of game creeping up. Like, I feel like it's been pretty steady for board games at large, but Kickstarter, you've seen it happen a lot more quickly. Like, I feel like $100 used to be sort of the, with the exception of like CMON all-ins and stuff like that, $100 was kind of like the high end for what Kickstarter could charge you for just a base game. Like Gloomhaven was in that vicinity, and Gloomhaven is the most game in a box I've ever seen in terms of just sheer stuff, as well as just time, amount of content. But I feel like you're now starting to see base pledges for games and deluxe pledges for games creep towards like the $120, $150 price point, and then the all-in
$120 plus shipping.
Right, exactly. Well, especially
like,
when you factor in shipping, yeah.
They decoupled the shipping from it a few years ago, I feel like, as a way to just kind of
That's a good
costs.
point too. Yeah, it used to always be that the shipping would be included as part of the pledge, and now it rarely ever is. And then your all-ins get as high as like $250, $300, which is it's a lot to pay for one board game.
Another thing, as far as price goes, they're on the sort of other end of the spectrum from the Splotters and Hollandspiels and Oinks. But mass market is a place where you can get, if done well, you can get a lot of game for less price because of just the economies of scale. And I think a shout out to the Prospero Hall set of games is apt. Jaws, Horrified, Villainous, even the Bob Ross game. I've heard great things now about the new Pan Am game. These are all games that are definitely under $40 at the most. I think most of them top out about $35, and they're all solid. I've played a bunch of them. They've always hit on one level or another. The components are always fine enough quality. I feel like you get a lot of bang for the buck when it comes to Prospero Hall games. So
that's cool. That's cool to see that there's a company catering to that audience that isn't just putting out like, junk games. Like that's very cool.
Absolutely. 100%. They're taking IPs and interesting stuff like that and really like making good games.
Yeah, I think my closing thoughts on price is actually just a call to listeners of the show. And feel free to reach out on Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord or at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com, or you can find us all on Twitter, wherever you want. Do you find the discussion of price to be something that's valuable when we're comparing games on Board Game Barrage? You know, a lot of times we'll be like, this filler game is better than that filler game, but sometimes that filler game is 3 times as expensive. And so, you know, we definitely like to reflect what you want to hear about. If that's something you'd like us to be more conscious of on the show, you know, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Or if that's not really a factor in how you decide, I'd love to talk to people about this stuff. I think this is really, really fascinating and something I'm always interested in, and figuring out how other people think about it. Because there's a lot of different opinions in this space. And I think, you know, many of the previous Board Game Barrage episodes were born out of me not understanding Mark and his trading lifestyle. And here we are on trade number 3, and he stole a bunch of games from me, and I bet you I'm going to accidentally reacquire one in this math trade.
I think the copy of Faces that I just got back from you, I have like traded that exact same copy away and somehow landed like to somebody else, and somehow it got to you, and now it's back to me. So they always come back.
We'll see if you can find the recording device I hid in it.
So that's going to do it for our talk about pricing, and that's going to do it for our episode. As always, you can find us on all forms of social media. You can find us at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord, as we said. And why not leave us a review? Maybe let's work at some synonym for the word money in a review. We always love seeing your reviews, and that'll be a little game. We've already given you a bunch of synonyms for cash, but think of your own and put it in a review. You can find us Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere you're looking, we're there. Join the math trade, boardgamebarrage.com/trade to join the math trade.
What would this review even say? I just sent these guys 50 bananas. Like what?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I trust the creativity of our listeners. You may not, Kellen, but I trust them.
Well, my Venmo account is at...
Thank you as always to Heart Society for our intro and outro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from the album Wake the Queens. Until next week, keep your wallets in your pockets and see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Or place this many, control chits, control bits, control. What do you call the squares? Control squares. They're not squares. Just
So
cubes. 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 Squares, but in the third dimension. Cubes.
Plays a lot like Vanilla Ticket to Ride USA with a couple small tweaks. The biggest one, and this will give you an idea of how close to the original it is some destinations are known as tourist attractions. So if you have a train, they're not trains, actually. They are taxis.
Yeah.
So wait, all of the pieces are taxis?
Yes.
What is this garbage? No one
New
thinks
York.
a taxi.
Have you ever been to New York?
Oh my.
They got taxis all over. Anyway.
No, I think this injustice can't stand, because I want you guys to know where the map ends.
You're speaking
on
for
this
all
board.
native New Yorkers.
Exactly. I'm speaking for everyone who loves Sbarro pizza like I do. It stops at Central Park.
That's New York.
No.
That's all in New York.
Oh my God.
All right.
This is the whole thing. Harlem, ever heard of it? Can't go there on this game.
So
They'd rather have
the differences between
Wall Street than Harlem. Great job, guys.
You can tune into Kellen's New York podcast, which is coming up after this one, so stay tuned.
My Life in Harlem.
That's right.
Allen.
Growing Up in the Bronx by Kellen Allen.
Okay, this is bad.
So the primary difference between...